Good morning, everyone. Happy Monday, and welcome to another episode of Tea and Coffee with Paula and
Jay. Good morning, everybody. Great that you're all here with us. And we hit 2,000 on YouTube. So we're growing. We're growing. What do you think of that?
That's all right. Decent.
Decent. Decent. Absolutely. But thank you to everybody who's joining us bright early. Yeah, climbing right now. Good to see you all or see from you all. Come on. Two more. Let's get two more. One more. Let's get one more. Let's get up there. Come on. Let's get up there. One more.
Well, while you're messing around with that, Jason, great conversation with the guys on Saturday. Worth my time. And that's from our locals chat. So that was for the mashup.
Absolutely. And you can see that the mashup is growing, not just in audience, but also in who we can get on the show. And you're going to be very excited with the next one. It's going to be November 15th with the hint of an election in the air. It's going to be a very good episode. We're confirming one more guest, but I think everybody will be pleased because it will be an election-focused episode on the 15th. Okay. Whether we have one or not, it's in the air. And we'll definitely talk more about Carney and why I don't think this would be a good time for him to call an election.
Yeah, I would agree. It seems I would be in agreement with that. I don't think it's the right time either.
We may see the NDP get swallowed up, merger and acquisition from a global banker, possibly.
Yes.
Buy them with UBI. These might be the things on the table.
Bought them with dental already.
Well, for sure. And they do have a strong history of supporting the Liberals when the money's right. And I think it'd be risky for Carney to do an election. But we'll get into that one a lot more over the coming weeks as this kind of rolls out, the budget and stuff like that. I believe, tomorrow we're doing a special episode about the budget reveal. Yep. So Nico, myself, and Nadine Wellwood, and we may have a few more guests tomorrow doing a special on Source One to cover the budget announcement, see how it goes.
Okay, and that'll be during the day live or subsequently in the evening?
I think it's going to be during the day. I got to kind of balance that with council because I'm going to go check it out tomorrow.
Oh, I have one too. So we have to work out childcare.
I'll bring one of the boys or both of the boys. But in either case, we'll figure this out because it's the first council meeting for Brownsville County, the new council. Six people with 3 new faces. 3 old faces, one that I'm not a fan of for sure. But we'll go check that out and be ready. So whether I watch it online and participate via remotely because of childcare or what, we'll figure this out. But you're saying your trustee is the same day?
Same day. So I think that's going to be something we would need to be aware of going forward. They seem to have that. But I'm going to check because there's 2 meetings in November. One on the 4th, and I think the other one's on the 16th. So I'm going to check with Becky to find out. Are both open to the public? Because they both have different headings on them. I'm going to ask her what the difference is between them.
Are yours remote? Do you like to have a remote?
I don't know, and I'll find out.
Okay.
I'll find out.
We may have to balance between the two.
Yeah.
We'll figure that out. See, folks, we can handle any issues. But I'm really looking forward to this episode. It's Bruce Pardy, and went through his article. I'm sure many of you have as well, and quite a few of you are joining because it's Bruce Pardy. And look, he's not lying. He's not making up the law. He's interpreting the law, and he's highlighting some problem. Well, a problem, Section 2.4. And we'll see where it goes because, again, it's not Bruce's decision.
Right.
It's coming up in the courts. But it certainly ruffled feathers across Alberta. It's caused some people to change their opinion on Bruce and caused more people to support Bruce because the best type of voice out there is the one that's unabashed and unafraid to say the difficult part out loud.
And I think Bruce has made it very clear over the months that no, he's for Alberta separation and independence and how it's going to benefit the overall the country. But no, I don't think I've never seen him as a naysayer or anything like that. And so I listen to what he has to say because if he's highlighting things that we need to be aware of, well, let's be aware of it and let's see how we can move forward from it.
For sure, being prepared, hammering out some of the different options, and even equipping the APP, who is the respondent on the application in front of the court, with even more ability to kind of counter any of the arguments that come up, because mostly they're going to be around Indigenous issues and the Canadian Charter and Constitution. So Constitution, actually, not the Charter. Charter is an agreement with the people in the government. The Constitution is the framework for the government, and it's mostly around that issue. We'll get into that one for sure. Quick update on the homestead. The generator seems to be doing good, and it might kick in during the show.
Yep, exactly. And we've begun on skirting and all is well. Yeah, all is good.
We had a tall young man join us. I'm sure his mother's listening to help us get a lot of the tall young man work done.
Yes.
Because we have, well, one tall, not so young man, and the rest of you are normal heights. Normies, as we like to refer to you. Yeah. And needed his help to kind of reach some things. We got all that done. So thank you very much. And to the wonderful mother who's likely listening, you've done a great job on this young man for sure.
Yeah. Well, with both kids, we like them. They're good.
Well, I worked with one.
Yes.
During the weekend. So no, I'm not trying to isolate or say anything about anybody else. This young man is a very good young man, hockey player, 15, head on his shoulders, very bright, very smart, and very helpful. So I'm very thankful.
And not afraid of hard work.
No, not at all. Like I even gave him the same kind of, not test, but same thing that I did with you was, hey, do you want to just break now and then get work done later? He's like, no, let's work now. Great, let's get that done.
Yeah, because in fact, when we did stop for lunch, he was the one who was like, I don't want to go outside.
Well, it turned out it actually worked out because I actually had to do a phone call.
Yeah.
So I did that and then went right back to work. But these bones are getting old.
I know,
I needed to recharge
dude,
a bit.
I know. It's not easy to stand up anymore.
I thought you were agreeing with my bones being old. I'm like, I know. Yeah, I can see you. Yeah.
No. I am empathetic with you. It's like, yeah, I got old bones too.
Yeah, that's true. The other day you were achy. I'm not even sure why, but you were.
Yeah, I don't even know why. Well, no, I think it was just from doing all the work doing the Halloween stuff. There was lots of movement and carrying and going up and down ladders as well.
That's right. You helped set up the haunted house.
Yep.
Yeah, very active. And I saved the day with staplers.
Yeah, you came in with the staple gun. Where's your cape?
I need a cape for sure. Yeah, that thing wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for those 5 staples that I brought to the table.
There you go.
Excellent. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into the news because there's quite a bit that happened since Friday. And I definitely want to try and get through it all before Bruce gets here because the conversation with Bruce is going to be absolutely awesome. I'm really looking forward to it. So if you're here for Bruce, hang out, but let's get through the news.
Yeah.
So I know we don't like to keep seeing this face. Okay, I'm sorry if I just hit you with this. I should have gave you a pre-warning. If you triggered, then I'm sorry about that. This is Barbara Perry, and Wiretap is doing a great job. He's going through the transcripts for the Coutts trial, covering the interview and the expert attempt to bring her in as an expert witness. So there was testimony around that. She had to dial in. It was a mess. And she does this shot from underneath her nose. This isn't from the court. So for those people going, how did he get that? This is just an image I found because she keeps her camera low. So we have to stare up her nose in order to hear from her. It's bad. But in either case, what Wiretap is highlighting here is how she is defining extremism. And she's very much in line with the Canadian Anti-Hate Network and that whole rhetoric about focusing on one side, defining extremism, and moving that line to include basically everybody that she doesn't agree with, which puts her in line with the liberal side of the government and the current governing powers. So here's my observation, because I was there in the Lethbridge court when Barbara Perry listed off what she claims. I'm reading off my post now. Makes someone an ideologically motivated, violent, got it, extremist. That hole is still healing, just so everybody knows. IMBE, according to her definition, Christian, white, male, gun owner, conservative, or disagreeing with government was enough. And there's an or there, which means you didn't have to be all of those. You had to be one or more. And that's what she says here. She said one or more of these are indicators for extremism. So I wonder how many people watching the show right now, according to her, is an extremist.
Yep. All
even you. Well, which one would you? You're a Christian.
Yeah.
You disagree with the government. You're conservative.
Yep.
And we'll leave it at that. We don't want to let everybody know what we own and don't own. Basically, every person in that courtroom would qualify. And you should have seen the faces on the sheriffs, the judge himself, everybody except for the prosecution, because he's the one bringing it forward. But even him, he had to hum and haw a little bit because, like, oh, geez, like, really? Because the judge reminded him a couple times she's not going to be a good witness. So he didn't end up bringing it forward. But I think it was very clear when you listen to her that she's the extremist. So I put in, I think her definition itself is an example of extremism. And she also needs to move her webcam, The up her nose shot was gross to be forced to watch. So apologies to the whole courtroom. We had to watch it. And plus she had tech issues. She kept dropping and having to come back. Really upset the court. But keep an eye on this, because what Jason at Wiretap is doing is he's doing some deep dives into this. He's going through the transcripts. He's highlighting a bunch of lying. She makes stuff up, and she self-sources, which means she sources herself.
Yeah.
So she's an expert because she read the report that she wrote. This is where I'm not
No,
joking.
no,
If you went through her testimony, that's exactly how she
Yeah.
highlighted herself as an expert. So keep an eye on that kind of stuff. I did an article here in response to some pushback I got about not being pleased with Tim Hortons' move in Grand Bend. Go ahead and read it. It's quite popular on Substack. I should do more of these articles because they take some time, but they have some good impact. And on this particular one, I think this is a short brief. Yeah, okay. So I'll go through this post, but you can go find it on my Substack.
And I'll put it in the chat right now.
Yeah. So breaking, Tim Hortons' long history with Canada's temporary foreign worker program is under scrutiny again. For more than a decade, Tim Hortons has leaned heavily on Canada's temporary foreign worker program, TFWP, a system meant to fill fundamental labor gaps, not replace Canadians. Now, in Grand Bend, Ontario, residents say their entire Tim Hortons staff was fired following a sale to new owners. Locals fear those jobs may soon be filled through the same federal program that's already drawn national criticism. In this new article, I traced 10 years of Tim Hortons' dependence on the TFWP from the 2014 moratorium to the 2025 Grand Bend controversy. Go ahead and check that out, because I break it down to how the government responded when it was under Harper, and then when it went back to Trudeau, how they kind of just dropped the ball and let it happen. And we got an update on this one. It actually turns out that possibly, because Jason's digging into this one as well from Wiretap, that almost all of them already were on the TFWP when the loss is only 10% of your workforce can be. So they may have already been abusing it. I think his research shows 60% Filipino descent and 40% Indian descent. So they may have already been abusing the program. So stay tuned to that one. And I'm also very careful not to say they are doing this, because we don't know that fact.
Right.
But what I'm highlighting here in this article is the perception from the public now, because they have abused this system for so long, that the default is, well, they must be doing it. So whether they're doing it or not, I can't say, and I don't say in this article. But what I do highlight is the 10 years of the abuse of the system, which has created this image of Tim Hortons as being a place that does not hire Canadian born or Canadian citizens anymore. So that was highlighted there. And yeah, my first article here that got the attention that spawned this was shared with you last week, because I think it's unacceptable. The temporary foreign worker program is not meant to replace.
Correct.
It specifically says you can only use it if you do not have a Canadian option. So they're clearly abusing it. So we got here from, first I posted about the Universal Ostrich Farm. The decision will be this Thursday morning. So 9:35, they're very precise with their time. I believe it's 9:35, 9:45, there we go. Thursday morning Eastern time, they're going to release a decision on whether or not they're going to hear the case. So if they just decline to hear the case, it's over.
Yeah.
The call will then happen. The CFIA is very prepared and ready to go with that. But if they decide to hear it, well, there's going to be several more months before there's a hearing scheduled. And at this stage, and I know this is going to upset a lot of people, custody stays with the CFIA unless the Supreme Court changes their stay or issues a new one, which puts the custody back with the Universal Ostrich Farm. Of course, David is covering this as well, David Creighton. And Wednesday, Katie will be joining us in the morning. So the day before the decision comes out, she didn't want to do it the day of. It's going to be too emotional for her, and I totally get it. So she'll be on here Wednesday to talk about the decision coming. And look, let's be honest, the Supreme Court doesn't have a history, and we're going to see again soon, the Supreme Court doesn't have a history of doing what's right for Canadians. As we know, on Friday, they had a decision that nobody liked. Well, very few. I can't believe some people are defending it. But in either case, Universal Ostrich Farm final decision on the application for leave is Thursday, and then we'll see what the next step is. I am preparing for the worst, and I'll be very pleased with better news.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So there's no honor among thieves. First,
Oh
Ford
my
tosses
goodness,
Carney
these
under the
guys.
bus by claiming Carney knew about the ads before airing in the US. Now Carney tosses Ford under the bus by apologizing to Trump. Canada is really a three-ring circus. Dun, 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 dun. And now it's even getting worse. Like depends how you look at it. The liberals are turning on Carney. You got some of these bigger names like Dumbbell Blau, Dean Dumbbell Blau. Yeah.
Dean Blundell, yeah.
No, he's
With
not
his
Blundell.
thing.
Dumbbell.
Dumbbell.
Bell. He's even saying, "Look, he's taking a knee. This is stupid." And Trump is wrong and lying, and Carney's now supporting his lie. No, actually, Trump wasn't lying, Dean. Trump was truthful. It was taken out of context. It misled the viewer. It was wrong. It was a nice attempt to try and smear Trump and tariffs, but it was stupid. But now Ford and Carney are throwing each other under the bus. That bus is going to be messy.
I know, man.
They keep doing this. But I kind of sit back and watch this. It's kind of like watching the Queers for Palestine stopping the LGBT protest. It's kind of like watching them eat themselves up here. Because, Doug is a liberal. He's under the conservative banner, but he certainly doesn't act like one. And here he goes, throwing each other under the bus. Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms had John Carpe on Friday, and they reposted it. Oh, thank you very much for your support there. And I love how they added you. And Paula Levine, Team Patch. Yeah. Because they reached out to me and said, you have some good chemistry with your co-host. I'm like, I hope so. She's my wife. Like, oh, okay. Halloween was a lot of fun for the Levines. We got a construction worker. We got our little Iron Man. Oh, Jacob, so cute. And then we got JJ, who was a possessed man.
In the process of being possessed, he was very clear. That's why the mask was half on his head.
He was going through the process of being possessed. And I'm like, put the mask on. He's like, no, I'm transitioning to a demon. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And then, of course, I was a separatist. And I either scared people or was their little hero. I got lots of good comments about it. A lot of people are like, yes, I love it. Let's do that. And then there's some people that were just kind of, hey, happy Halloween. So I was either scaring a few people and some people were quite happy. But thanks very much to our friend in Buck Creek for the picture. Our first stop was to go visit her and to say hi, and very generous Halloween people.
Shout out to the people in Buck Creek. We did Breton as well, but we went to Buck Creek first because we had some time to kill in the early evening. And you guys really represent your little community. You guys gave out bags, like lunch bags full of
hockey
stuff.
cards, drinks, snacks. And by the way, we're not a sugary family, so there's a lot of
there's a mountain of stuff on the table.
There's going to be several months worth of treats for sure. But thank you very much to everybody. It was a safe Halloween, and we sure enjoyed ourselves.
Yeah,
and I had to get the hockey stick. Hockey stick made it. Going to just be a stick. All right, and some people were not so good on Halloween. Here's what appears to be some mother with children just emptying up bowls. There are dozens of these videos where people are just dumping the whole thing. These are the take ones or take twos, and they're not. Okay? My highlight here is there needs to be a strong male figure in these people's lives, because I certainly would discourage anybody in our family to act this way. You wouldn't.
No kidding.
But I'm just saying, if this was how I saw even our kids act, this would be corrected very quickly.
We even came across a house that had just a box out with chips in it.
Well, there's a few of them, and then we were late in Breton, so some were empty, but no, there was it's a high trust society. This is what happens when people who are not trustworthy enter a high trust society. Like, you can tell there's a nice home, great marble, so this is a nice neighborhood, and maybe they targeted that neighborhood for this kind of purpose. But there's dozens of these videos. It's too bad to see. Okay, so shame on Global Calgary, so Calgary TV, Global TV in Calgary, because the way they're framing Danielle Smith's call to use a notwithstanding clause against the Supreme Court, which we can now get into. So on Friday, the Supreme Court ruling came out that said mandatory 1-year sentencing for child material. That's very upsetting and wrong and illegal. They said it is gross punishment. It shouldn't happen, and they use the Charter Section 12 of cruel and unusual punishment. Remove mandatory 1-year sentences. I want to highlight a couple things here. First, they have mandatory sentences on lots of things. So the fact that it's a mandatory sentence isn't what the Supreme Court made a decision on. It's on for this stuff, which is child abuse. Because if there is no market for
Yeah.
it, there's nobody making it, et cetera, et cetera. Also, the Supreme Court, which is dumb. This is what I'm worried about Thursday, because they really don't look at Canadians' rights, especially children's on this one. They're saying that here's a bunch of scenarios where this wouldn't be appropriate to have a 1-year sentence. So a 18-year-old male with a 17-year-old female sharing pictures, technically he would be sentenced to a year.
Yeah.
But first, we don't make law based on scenarios.
Yeah.
And second, that's a large reach, because first you got to be charged, then you got to get convicted, and then the sentence kicks in. Their decision wasn't based on whether or not people should be charged or even convicted. It was once convicted, the sentencing.
Mhm.
So in a balanced, fair society, I do not see anybody charging an 18-year-old for a 17-year-old girlfriend.
That's where the
sharing pictures.
discretion comes in.
Correct, because the charge would have to come forward. And then if it does come forward, what will the Crown do? Will they pursue it? That's another decision. I doubt it. And then if they did, what would the court do or a jury do?
Mhm.
Would they convict? I doubt it. I doubt that this would get all the way to sentencing, the scenario that they put into their decision. Wouldn't really happen, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But yet here's what a lot of people are saying. Well, in that situation, I understand why a 1-year minimum sentence, mandatory sentence, would seem harsh. But that's not what the Supreme Court should be deciding on. They should be deciding on just the facts and the evidence before them.
Yeah.
And in that case, this two gentlemen, men, or I'm trying to be polite,
Yeah, I know.
had over 300 photos, and they were just horrible photos. That's what was before the court, and whether or not they deserved to have it. And I say yes. I say bump it to 5 years. I would go in the other direction, but this is absolutely upset a lot of people. And I'm surprised at the type of people who are trying to water this down and say, don't look at that as the issue. The issue is whether or not the government should use a notwithstanding clause. Keep in mind, the notwithstanding clause is meant to balance an out-of-control judicial system. That's what it's for. That's why it exists within our system. It's for the elected side, the legislature, to go ahead and kind of control and stop out-of-control judges. The judicial side, that's what it's for. And I do think this should be used for this particular one, because again, you have to get through first a charge, then the decision by the Crown to prosecute, and then a prosecution, and then a conviction. These stages would flush out the not criminal activity, which the court highlighted as the scenarios that they're trying to protect. I'm not a fan of this one.
I
at
know.
all. Yeah. So I then said Alberta independent reason 1780. 1,780. There's a lot of them now. We will not be bound to the Supreme Court of Canada. And boy, we're going to get into this with our guest today, with Bruce Pardy, the Supreme Court of Canada and Alberta relationship. We're going to jump into that one soon. But for years now, they have been eroding human rights, and instead they have been protecting and upholding criminal rights. Protecting convicted criminals possessing child stuff is a new low. Absolutely. There was a decision, I can't remember which one it was, but it was several years back, where they said it's not, they were decriminalizing even sharing. But I think they kept possessing and creating criminal. But if you were, I'm not sure. I got to go back in the history. I remember a while ago around this issue, there was a decision that decriminalized a portion of it.
I wonder if that's because of the spread of social media, at least with children with their phones.
Could be, and maybe they forgot that decision and should go back and look at it and see how it related to this one. But the one that everybody's upset about, and rightfully so, is these guys were found guilty. I think they even confessed and pled guilty to, and it was horrible, the worst kind that you can possibly ever talk about. And now they're not going to be getting mandatory. Now, do keep in mind, the sentencing can still be several years. They're just removing the mandatory minimum I think they need to keep it as a deterrent and to make sure that people do not see this as an invitation to go ahead and participate in this activity.
Yeah.
How we protect the vulnerable is how you judge a society, and this is horrible.
Yep.
Wrong direction. We have Alberta Plumber. Could follow him online. I don't know who needs to hear this, but elementary students don't organize political walkouts. Shame on the parents.
Correct.
Correct. And then I highlighted, here's one. It's Thomas Lusakic. He posted about, it looks like his daughter, because he says Miss. I'll pull up the image here. St. Albert students are organizing. Young Miss Lusakic is leading organizing. Let's support our students participating in democracy. So there's one of the parents right there.
Mm-hmm.
Very proud of it. Posted it. Not a fan. All right. So I also highlighted the 5 Supreme Court justices, and no, this is not doxing. Their names listed in the decision.
Yeah.
And all I did here was highlight their decision. They called it grossly disproportionate to have this 1 year. So that's a quote from them in the decision. And therefore violated Section 12 of the Canadian Charter of Rights, which protects against cruel and unusual punishment. What about the cruel and unusual punishment for the children?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, there's not much to say. But 4 out of 5 of them were Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and from 2017 and on, so relatively recently. And one of them was Stephen Harper's appointment in 2011. And these are the yays. These are the ones that voted for it. So 5 out of 4. So just one of these would have been nice if that Harper one said no.
Yeah.
But one of these is all it would have taken to turn us the other way. But 4 of them was Justin Trudeau's appointments. And in my opinion, I put here, this is the sickest decision ever by the Supreme Court, and it was made possible by the sickest prime minister ever. And that will include even Thursdays. If that goes wrong, this is still worse.
Yeah.
Because this put, I think, children in harm's way.
Oh, yeah.
It kind of gave a signal to some of these bad people that we're not going to crack down on this here. And I think that was the wrong message. All right. And here's an example of somebody who's trying to downplay it. Kind of misleading people, pulling out the scenario from the decision and saying, hey, a lot of us would agree with this. Again, I don't think they should be using scenarios to make decisions, and doing this kind of thing, downplaying it, highlighting a piece and say, hey, we're all fine with an 18-year-old and 17-year-old, right? Makes me worry about this person.
Yeah.
Why would you downplay this?
And again, this is what discretion is for from the courts when it comes to sentencing. Yeah.
So this was a very big topic this weekend for sure, because it came out on Friday. We missed it. It came out right in the middle of our show. So, but here we go. Then also this got a lot of traction. So let this sink in. Alberta, or Danielle Smith, Premier Danielle Smith, used the charter to put children in school to be educated. So the notwithstanding clause of the charter. The Supreme Court of Canada used the charter to put children in harm's way to be sexually exploited. I'm not pleased with that decision. And there's no way to fix this. Alberta already stands alone. Let's make it official. So Alberta really needs to be a lot stronger, no matter what our path forward is. And we're going to get into this with Bruce in a couple minutes. Whatever our path is, we really need to kind of separate ourselves from some of this. And I think the Supreme Court of Canada, there's that big word, Canada, plays too much of a role in handcuffing us in certain ways that I don't think we should be under. I don't know if there's a way to fix it. I don't know if there's a way to work with it. But that particular decision is yet another example of how we're not putting the right people forward and first in our decision making here. It should be children over criminals.
Yes.
Wow, I can't believe I have to say that.
I know, right?
Yeah. So Saturday's episode, you've already highlighted this, our chat. You loved it, so check it out. It was Nico, myself, Pat King, Dan Fournier, Wayne Peters, and Matthew Ehrt talking about Carney, global ties, the history of the empire and globalists, what they're trying to do. Pat is well versed on this. He's done a lot of travel, and he actually exposed Carney way before we really knew who he was. He's totally connected to all these globalist groups. And there was some video that Pat shared that was concerning, where they're kind of bragging about taking influencers and controlling the narrative. And one quote from that was, NGOs are fast, but governments are faster when it comes to controlling the narrative. So yeah, check out that episode. People loved it. We were on the road. We were in a hotel there, and I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. Bruce, we're going to be with you in 2 more seconds here. I think Alberta Independent Reasons 1781. There we go.
Already gone up by one
You
again.
can look forward to 1782 soon. Alberta would likely be a right to work nation. For those of you who don't know what that is, we'll explain it to you right now. With smaller government, less regulations, and more freedoms, Alberta would likely abolish laws that force workers to join and pay for the political special interests of union leadership. In a free market, unions would be optional, and they would compete for members by truly representing the best interests of the workers. So this is not an anti-union, and half of the U.S. states have this right to work. This is your choice as an employee whether or not you want to join a union, and this forces the union to actually attract membership by focusing on the needs of the membership. This is the most pro-union thing you can do because it corrects unions into being fighting for the workers, not the political interests of the leadership.
Right, which is what the unions were originally based on. Or like they came to help support the workers, give them good infrastructure.
Correct. Like people would say, "Hey, stay away from the unions. They got us weekends. We have weekends. If you enjoy your weekends, thank a union." Sure, unions have done some great things. More recently, they have not. Okay, and this would get them back on track. So this is not anti-union. This is pro-union. This is
better unions.
Pro-union representing workers. And I think the decision, we covered that. The last big issue, so this is the last one. Then we're with Bruce. So the snap election conversation, and we touched on this a little bit, but I think it's the Liberals trying to force the NDP to work with them because the NDP has the most to lose. They are broke. They have no leader. Like if there's an election called this year, they would be in the worst position. No leader. They have no money. And I think several of the NDP MPs, in order to try and save their seat, would consider working with the Liberals or maybe a full-on merger. So I don't think that Carney or the establishment signaling an actual election. This is more of a threat to the NDP, in my opinion, in order to get in line or face an election where they likely won't do well.
Yeah.
They're not ready for it. They don't have a leader. All right. So on that note, let's go ahead and bring in the man of the half an hour, Mr. Pardy.
Good morning. How are you?
We are very good. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Are you in Alberta right now?
No, right now I'm in Toronto at the moment.
No, are you welcome in Alberta right now? There's a lot of
oh my well. I don't know. You would have to tell me.
I think you are
because
sure. Like I said at the top of this show, we really appreciate people who say the difficult things out loud. There's no sugarcoating here. Halloween had enough sugar. We don't need any more. And what we need to do is to address potential hurdles head on and not to ignore them. So I'm a big fan of what you did, but I do see others are not.
Right.
And in fact, when I announced that you were coming on the show, somebody sent me a post and said, that's a good way to lose viewers. And my response to them, well, you're obviously not a viewer because if you watch my show, I don't pander to anybody. I want to bring the truth forward and have conversations. So you're obviously not a viewer, but that is the kind of sentiment that I'm seeing online. People don't even want to hear this. They want to be an ostrich and stick their head in the sand.
Yeah.
Right.
What kind of pushback have you received? And I'm sure there's a lot of support, but what kind of pushback have you received on this?
Oh yeah, no, a lot. Well, so this is the strange thing is that this is not a thing that I would have thought needed support or not support. Like it's not there's nothing in this that is making a political case for something. This is my intent was simply to point something out, and that something is this. The APP, of course, is trying to get their proposed question approved, and that endeavor takes place within the context of an Alberta statute. It is the Alberta statute that makes that possible.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, as everybody knows, that question has been referred to a court. The reason it's been referred to a court is that there is a strange section in the Alberta statute that might hold it up. Well, it is holding it up, but it might get in the way. And there's no reason for that section to be in there. It's a strange section that makes no sense. It says, there it is right there. It must not, a proposal must not contravene sections 1 to 35.1 of the Constitution Act 1982. And so
That's the whole Constitution, right?
This hearing at the Court of King's Bench is about whether or not the proposed question is contrary to that section or not. Now, the problem is that the section doesn't make any sense. Why is it there? And let me just back up a minute, because there's a lot of confusion about this. There is there's a whole set of principles about statutory interpretation, how courts are supposed to go about interpreting the words of statutes. And some of the principles reflect certain kinds of what I might call essential myths. And by myth, I don't mean necessarily, outright falsehood. I just mean these are the assumptions under which the courts proceed to interpret a section. Here's one of them: that when legislatures pass a statute, the legislature has an intent. Now, legislatures as a body don't have a single intent. All the people in the legislature don't believe the same thing and don't want the same thing. They vote on it. And so the parties disagree and the members disagree. So there is no singular intent. But nevertheless, the proposition is in the court, they have to take the words and figure out, what the intent was. What does the provision mean? Now, this is about putting forward a question, getting the question approved. And the section says, the proposal can't contravene sections 1 to 35.1 of the Constitution. Okay. Well, the argument against the hearing, the argument saying, well, you should let the question through, is that, well, a proposal question cannot itself contravene the Constitution. That's impossible. All you're doing is proposing a question for a referendum, and if there's going to be any contravening, it's going to be way down the line. That is true, but that doesn't solve the problem, because the provision exists, and because the provision exists, it must mean something. The court's going to say, look, the provision exists. The legislature put it in there. What does it mean? And so this sort of ordinary meaning of the word contravene, that the point is quite right, but it might not win the day, because the court has to figure out what the provision is supposed to mean. Now, this provision applies with respect to sections 1 to 35.1 of the Constitution Act 1982. Okay, that's the Charter and Aboriginal rights. So there is some kind of restriction that was intended by the provision that applies to questions with respect to those sections of the Constitution and not with respect to other sections of the Constitution. Okay, so I don't think it will do simply to say, well, a question can't contravene the Constitution, so the provision is irrelevant. Let's just ignore it. That answer won't do, probably, because the court's going to say, no, it exists. So what does it mean? And so what it probably means, and by the way, this this enterprise of trying to predict what courts are going to do is fraught with difficulty, right? Because courts come out with these things all the time that you don't expect. So, who's to know exactly?
But Friday's decision from the Supreme Court?
Yeah, sir. Well, that might have been predictable, but we'll get onto that later. Maybe. Yeah. But so the bottom line is, who knows? Who knows how this is going to go? But the court is probably going to say, we need to know what restriction it is that applies to questions with respect to those sections and does not apply with respect to the other sections. What is the distinction? And one of the possible outcomes is that the court will say, what the legislature meant by contravene is that you can't propose a constitutional amendment that changes those sections of the Constitution. You can
propose, like, for example, we couldn't And I'm just going to jump on a couple things you said there before we go down this road, because I know where you're headed, because I read the article. I want to bring up the definition of contravene so that people understand what we're talking about here. It is violate the prohibition or order of a law, treaty, or code of conduct. So that word was specifically used to be very clear that it can't change the Constitution in any way, shape, or form. And you also highlighted something here that was very important. This doesn't say today. This actually leaves it open to any time. So however this question comes out, turns into a referendum and moves down the line, this section is highlighting any step. It's not saying only today. So if in the future this could change, the Constitution is trying to capture that as well. And where you were about to go there, and I think this is very important. For example, Alberta couldn't have, and this would make sense, Alberta couldn't have a referendum that said we dropped monarchy. Like, that's not a change that a referendum Alberta could do, or they couldn't have one that says we're going to get rid of Section 1.
Well, I'm not sure about the monarchy even, because so sections 1 to 35.1 are the Charter and constitutional rights. So according to that provision, if we apply this meaning, that is, you can't propose a question that proposes to change the Constitution in those respects. In other words, you can propose to amend the Constitution in any way you like, except for the Charter and Aboriginal rights. Those are non-negotiable. That's one of the possible readings of the section. But that means that you can propose to change anything else.
Change anything else, or even not be under it anymore. Like, part of the argument could be leaving the Constitution isn't a change. Like, that could be part of the counter argument there.
Well, perhaps, but if you are proposing to leave it altogether, and then this is part of the conundrum, right? Because
the nuance,
well, it's not. It's a nuance, yes, but maybe even more than a nuance, which is if independence referenda were contemplated by the government, by the minister, when this was put forward, but you have a section in there that says, oh, you can't change the Charter and Aboriginal rights. Well, but how do those two things go together? Because if you're leaving the Constitution altogether, then you are changing the application of the Charter and Aboriginal rights to Alberta, and that means you might be violating the provision, right?
Like how it applies to, right? But if you're not changing the Canadian Constitution, then maybe the argument could be made here. And I'm just trying
no, because remember, this statute only applies to Alberta. This is an Alberta statute, so you're talking about what happens inside Alberta only. So if you cannot contravene the Charter in Alberta, and you're getting rid of the Charter, then perhaps, possibly, in the words of the section, you are contravening the Charter, right? So
I think that's what. And I think that's where we're going to have some fun. That's why there's a good debate here: is what does contravene mean when it comes to the Charter? If you're not changing it, you're just leaving it. Is that considered a change? Or
but you're not just but yeah, that's true. And this is getting to the core of the problem, right? But so if you say, well, I'm not changing it, I'm just leaving it, what you're doing is you are obliterating it. You're saying for Alberta, the Charter does not exist anymore. Okay, that is contravening the Charter, right? So,
well, it can be argued that it is.
Let's not lose sight of the bottom line. The bottom line is that this is an inexplicable provision that does not belong on the statute. This was probably a blunder.
I'll get to that in a second, because I got some information about that.
Well, I just want to also highlight something here that so in our locals chat, hasn't Quebec dropped the monarchy in their parliament? It says yes, they have.
Sure, but they didn't have to change the Constitution for that. They just don't recognize and uphold it. And I think they're even talking about firing their lieutenant governor. But I want to kind of box this issue a little bit more. If you had a prenup in your marriage, and the prenup says you can't change the prenup, but you can leave the marriage without changing the prenup. That's kind of where I'm going with this. Like, there may be a clause within our legislation here in Alberta, which I think we'll get into a second, whether it was intentional or not. And I know it was last minute, and I know that Mickey Amory put it in there last minute, and it kind of just slipped in at the 11th hour. Whether he intended that or not, he's also the same guy that put demonstrably justified in our Bill of Rights amendment. Last minute, 11th hour, same type of system here. But anyways, we'll pause that part of it. But if you look at the Constitution as a prenup, And we're not changing the prenup. We're not changing, how much money we're going to get if there's a divorce or anything like that. We're just leaving. Could it be argued that it's not contravening anything because nothing's being changed?
Well, you can argue it, sure, but here's the difficulty.
Well, we gotta find a way to argue.
Well, the best way to fix this problem is for the UCP to get rid of the section.
Yeah,
that's the
we agree
line.
on that one,
right?
We agree on that one.
But in the courtroom, the problem is this. So in the statute, there are 3 different kinds of proposals. Yes, policy proposals, legislative proposals, and constitutional proposals. If you're doing a constitutional proposal, you are proposing to amend the Constitution, right? But that's what it is.
Now, does Alberta have a constitution right now?
Well, it has a provincial constitution, yes.
Can it be argued that that's provincial constitution contravening, not federal?
No, I don't. No.
Okay. I'm trying here.
No. So if you're doing a constitutional,
never mind. It said 1 through 35. Yeah, it highlighted the sections from the Canadian.
If you're doing a constitutional proposal, which is what an independence, petition would be, then you're proposing to amend the Constitution as it applies to Alberta. Okay. If you take that argument about the meaning of contravene and say, well, a question can never contravene the Constitution because it's just a question. We're just asking a question. It's just going to be a referendum. Nothing's happened yet. That renders the provision meaningless. That is probably not the meaning that the court's going to adopt, because that's contrary to the proposition that when a legislature includes a provision, that means something.
Mm-hmm.
And so the question we're still left with is, if it means something, then what does it mean? And there are very few other choices left. Now, you might say, well, it prevents people from making proposals that are clearly outrageously unconstitutional. So let's say, there's a proposal to say, let's eliminate or freedom of association.
Let's do an easy one. Let's do the equalization payments.
Well, okay,
in the
equalization payments are not in the charter.
Oh, not the charter, no, but they're in the Constitution.
So, but this is the point. So if you bring forward a proposal to amend the Constitution, equalization reference, or let's say there's a proposal that Alberta will unilaterally amend sections 91 and 92 of the BNA Act, the Constitution Act 1867. Okay, we're going to come in and change the division of powers between the province and the feds. Okay, well, that seems kind of outrageous. It suggests doing it not in accordance with the amending formula. Okay, but this section does not apply to that because it's not in the charter or section 35. You can do that.
Hold on. I'm just wrapping my head around, because we keep going charter and constitution, and this says contrary sections 1 to 35(1) of the Constitution Act 1982.
Yeah,
so
that's the charter and section 30 and section 35. That's the charter and Aboriginal rights.
Okay, so it's not the whole. Does a charter say a province can't leave?
No. The charter doesn't say that. But let's just go back a step again, because here's one of the sources of the confusion, because the section refers to the charter and Aboriginal rights, and so it sounds like we are now into a constitutional question, as in, is the question constitutional? Okay, I want to emphasize this. The question is not being challenged as unconstitutional per se. This is purely a matter that is contained within the Alberta statute. It's got nothing to do with independence itself, nothing to do with the actual Constitution. It does not have to do with the Federal Clarity Act. It does not have to do with the Supreme Court decision about separation. None of those things are what's happening here. What you've got here.
And let's be clear: the federal government's not intervening, and this has nothing to do with the
federal government. Is not involved in this. The federal government has not said, "Hey, you can't do that." The federal government has no role in this. This is a made in Alberta problem. What Alberta has done is pass a statute, and that statute is a mechanism for its own people to propose petitions to the government to hold a referendum. And that statute has certain requirements. This section is one of the requirements. That is all. It's simply saying, if you're going to use this mechanism in the statute, here are the kinds of things that you cannot do. Okay. And the chief electoral officer saw the question, saw the provision, and said, well, I'm not sure what that means, whether or not it complies or not. I'm going to go to the court.
Yeah.
And the court
and
now has the job of saying,
it.
this is what the section says. This is what the section says. This is what the proposed question says. How does this work? And the fact of the matter is, it doesn't work very well because it's not clear what it means. So the error has been the legislatures and by implication, the government. You haven't told us what you mean. And because you haven't told us, it is now up to the court to figure out a meaning of this provision that doesn't make much sense.
So you laid out two options that can come out of the court. One is they uphold it and they say it is contravening and not allowed. The question is not allowed. Right. And then what was the second one that you highlighted as a potential outcome from the court?
Okay, so the potential other outcome, maybe, these are all maybes.
Mm-hmm.
The other possible outcome is to say, well, yeah, you can do.
Oh, right, it's the condition, the undertaking.
But the whole undertaking is conditional on the idea that whatever the final outcome, that final outcome cannot include getting rid of the charter in Section 35. So in other words, you can go ahead with this process, but whatever happens, your independence has to keep the Canadian charter or its equivalent and Section 35 in Alberta. And my argument is that is not independence. Mm-hmm. That is being wedded to the old model that you were trying to escape. And there's another difficulty here as well. It's reflected in this section of the Citizen Initiative Act, but it is also reflected in the Referendum Act, which is the act under which the Alberta government will hold referenda. So if the Alberta government is holding an independence referendum, it is subject to its own Referendum Act, not federal, not Ottawa, the Alberta Referendum Act. Now that statute, it doesn't have the same section, but it has a similar section with respect to Section 35, Aboriginal rights. It says that whatever happens in this referendum, it will not derogate from Aboriginal and treaty rights guaranteed under Section 35 of the Constitution. In other words, even in the other act, the one that applies to the government, your hands are tied. They are tied by the Alberta government's own legislation. In other words, the Alberta government in both of these situations is not allowing the people to decide whether you want a clean slate. And my point is, if you're serious about independence, you need to have your own government repeal both those sections, one in the Citizen Initiative Act and the other one in the Referendum Act.
Okay, so there's a few there to unpack. One of the things was Danielle Smith and Mickey Amory came out shortly after this got bumped into the court and said, listen, let them have their vote. So right. I wonder if they were signaling to the court there that their intent wasn't to stop this particular vote, maybe something more specific. So maybe that's one of the signals, at least from the legislature and Mickey Amory specifically, was, no, we didn't mean to stop this type of vote. So maybe the court will decide bad law, it's not meant to stop anything that's okay under the Clarity Act. Maybe they're going to look down the road a little bit further and say, well, if this is valid by the Supreme Court's Clarity Act, that's not what they intended.
Yeah, okay. Well, so first of all, though, the Clarity Act here is really not the question.
No, but in the court's thinking about what the intent was, because maybe the intent was from the legislature not to put a hurdle in place for the particular question that could be done under the Clarity Act. It's for anything else that you come up. Like, let's just go and remove all our treaties. Let's go ahead and do all these other things. Maybe it was meant to stop those kind of things, but not this particular question.
Okay, so let's go to the statement that you referred to from Mickey Amory.
Danielle and Amory, yeah.
And Danielle as well. Yes.
Yeah.
I'll just read it. This is a statement from Amory. He said the recently passed amendments to the Citizen Initiative Act are intended to be broadly permissive and to allow Albertans the opportunity to launch a referendum petition without needless bureaucratic red tape or court applications slowing the process. Okay. I mean, that is great. That's terrific.
That doesn't address their.
So why did you put the section in the statute? Right? Once a statute is passed, even if that's the minister who has proposed the statute and had control over what the draft said and so on, once the statute is passed, its meaning is no longer under the control of the minister.
Right.
It is the court's job to take the words and decide what they can possibly mean. And I don't know what he had in mind with this statement. It's very odd for a minister to come forward with a statement basically trying to tell the court what the thing is supposed to mean. But it's out of his hands now. And he might have intended that, as his statement reflects. But the thing that nobody has answered yet is, if this section is not supposed to mean all of this, that the question is restricted to, complying and embracing the Charter and Aboriginal rights. If it's not supposed to mean that, then what does it mean? And it can't mean, well, it probably can't mean nothing. You can't say, well, a question can never contravene and therefore ignore it. It will not be ignored. It means something. So we in order to know what it means, we have to be able to identify a scenario, a proposed question that this section would actually restrict, because that seems to be its purpose. No proposal can contravene. So what kind of proposal are you talking about? What kind of constitutional proposal is this section supposed to restrict? Identify one. Hypothetically, what are we talking about?
Well, maybe here's one. You can't cancel the treaties. But could you have a referendum on canceling all treaties?
But that's what I'm getting at. That's exactly what I'm getting at. If you cannot put forth a proposed question for a proposed referendum saying we propose to amend the Constitution, Section 35, so that we cancel treaty rights. That's exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about. That means you're not allowed to ask the question. That's consistent with my interpretation of what I think the court might come to on this section.
And that's why we're seeing lots of intervening from Aboriginal groups. And this is where it looks like the court's focusing on, because even Danielle came out after and said, look, we can't violate all these treaties. Yeah. There was a cease and desist from chiefs in Alberta, said, careful, you can't violate our treaties. And maybe this is the tie. So let's now try and put on you got added to the APP's team. How would you argue this in front of the judge so that it could go forward without violating any treaties or the interpretation? Or how would you argue the court should maybe look at this if your intent was to get to the Clarity Act with a valid question?
Right. Very difficult. And the job that the APP lawyers have is very difficult. It's an unfair job that they have to do. The section makes no sense. The answer here, I think, is going to be a political one rather than a legal one. I mean, the people who belong to the UCP. I understand there's a members meeting coming up in this month.
AGM.
If you want to see a question go forward for a proposed independence referendum, free and clear of any restrictions, so that the people can decide what they want, then I would like to see the members of the UCP tell its party, you have to amend these two statutes. You have to get rid of these sections because you are tying the people's hands. I mean, the meaning of the section in the Citizen Initiative Act is unclear. The meaning of the section in the Referendum Act is not so much. That's pretty clear. I'm just going to read that section out to you. The
And while you're
referendum
pulling
act,
it up, just to explain
right?
to the audience what you're talking about, is the government can have referendums without Citizens Initiative Act,
Mm.
and they have their own act that governs that one as well.
This is 8.11 subsection 3. Nothing in a referendum held under this act is to be construed as abrogating or derogating from the existing Aboriginal and treaty rights of the Aboriginal peoples of Canada that are recognized and affirmed by Section 35 of the Constitution Act 1982. In other words, we are not going to allow you to decide whether or not you want Aboriginal rights and special status and treaty rights and so on to continue.
So that's in both. Okay. So, and it sounds very specific to Aboriginal rights.
Correct.
And the treaties. Okay.
That's right.
Now,
That's right.
one outcome could be this judge takes a look at that and says, actually, this question doesn't say anything about changing treaty rights at all, and move it forward and make the decision that this
Well, right, but that
without
section of
the undertaking.
that section of the Referendum Act, though, says that the results of any referendum held under the act, which is the government holding a referendum of any kind, cannot be construed for that result. So if the government is holding an independence referendum and the question says nothing about Aboriginal rights, the statute is telling the government, the government's own statute is telling the government, well, whatever the result here is, you can't move forward in a way that changes the guarantee of Aboriginal rights in Section 35 of the Canadian Constitution. Okay. That is predetermining the outcome of the referendum question and what the people want.
Okay, so because I spoke to Jeff Raff and many of the ABP many times on this one, Jeff is for maintaining the Aboriginal rights. Okay,
Yes,
he's not for a clean slate on that at all.
No.
With his history, he's absolutely for maintaining that. The one thing I did disagree, and not many things I disagree with you on, but the one thing I did disagree with is the APP wouldn't be in a position to create an undertaking for the future process. That's not something they can impact or enforce. They can maybe make an undertaking, cause a court to enforce it later, but I don't think they're in a position to do those kind of undertakings. But what could be setting the stage of is the referendum happens. First, we got to get to the vote that says yes. But then the negotiations that start with Canada starts with Aboriginal rights still on the table, and those can't be abridged or contravened in any way, shape, or form. So we start with the negotiation, the good faith negotiation with Canada with Aboriginal rights as they stand. That could be how this table is set. What are your thoughts about there?
Well, perhaps, but again, the Alberta statute is introducing an uncertainty that doesn't need to be there. Even the Supreme Court of Canada, in its 1998 reference case, mentioned, the nature of these negotiations, which they called political. And they said in those negotiations, the expectation would be that, the various interests of the various parties, including Aboriginal peoples, quote, should be taken into account. Okay. Taken into account simply means that they're on the table and you consider them and then you do what you see best. Okay. That is not a guarantee. That is a much lower threshold than what this section of the Referendum Act has done. The Referendum Act could well tie the hands of Alberta in its negotiations after a referendum, because the negotiations follow the referendum, right? The section says nothing that follows from a referendum shall derogate from Section 35. Okay. And with respect to this undertaking, I take your point that the APP itself cannot make that promise because they don't have the power to do that. But what I'm talking about is this. The APP represents in court, it's an argument that they make that says, don't worry about this, court, because what's going to happen is that this question that might lead to a referendum, whatever happens, is not going to do away with charter rights and not doing away with Aboriginal rights. And the court, having heard those submissions, might make that into a condition of the proposal, and therefore a condition of the referendum, and therefore a condition of the negotiations. In other words, if you have a court decision that says Alberta may not do the following things in its negotiations with the rest of Canada. And then it goes ahead and does it anyway. Well, now you've introduced an uncertainty about the validity, the legitimacy of the independence that you're seeking. Okay? It's just a complication that you do not need.
And you know what? I'm seeing this as a positive a bit here, Bruce, and this is why I'm going to highlight this. If the court comes out and says, here's a piece of the conversation that can't be changed, Aboriginal rights, as is, treaties staying in effect, they are.
Right.
That actually takes that whole uncertainty off the table for the rest of the referendum. If there's an entire understanding already at the beginning that things can't change because of the legislation.
But if you do that,
might actually simplify the question going forward.
Yeah, but if you do that, then you will have predetermined the nature of the country you're going to have.
The starting point. No, you're not wrong.
That means that the country that you have will continue the practice of having different kinds of rights for different kinds of people. That rights will depend upon your lineage, your group affiliation, your group, and so on. You are setting your country off on, for my money, off on the wrong foot. And once that is established, you'll never be able to change it again. You're seeking a fresh start with a new set of principles. And if you have an old principle forced upon you from the old country you're trying to get out of, then suddenly you have the same system again. So, and there are a lot of people, including me, who are of the opinion that if Aboriginal rights are going to continue in the way that they exist now in Alberta, then we're not so keen on independence at all. The whole idea is to start fresh with a new set of ideas. And so if the proposition is no, there are certain things that are going to remain exactly the same, they can't be touched, they're sacred cows, they're non-negotiable, we will not consider this. Well, then, it puts the whole project into question for a whole lot of people.
No, and I get that, and I really do. And I don't want to say things like it's better this way than not, because the alternative is like not even trying. But the way I'm seeing this in my mind, and I have a funky mind the way it works, you will never, once you're married and have children, you'll never have a fresh start with a marriage without children. You're going to have children, no matter if you get a divorce or not. There's going to be alimony, there's going to be preconditions, and you'll never be able to get rid of those responsibilities. And I'm not calling Aboriginal children. I'm just trying to kind of map this in my mind. You'll never have a fresh second marriage. You're going to have an ex. You're going to have baggage or whatever you want to call it from the first one too. And if we can get to independence with a couple caveats, and that's what it takes to get there, that's better than none. Now, the political push, the AGM is this month, getting this changed so that's not on the table, I don't see that appetite. Okay, I've been talking to a lot of people in the UCP. They don't even want to talk about independence at the AGM, let alone make this change.
Right.
Okay. And another thing I want to highlight is I had an interview with Danielle Smith. I haven't fully released it, but maybe I'm just going to expedite and get that out there because I think it's very important at this stage. She said we're having a referendum, whether it's Thomas Lusakis or APPs, but not a government one. It has to be a citizen-based one. Now, what you've highlighted here is no matter whose question goes forward, this is still the stick in the mud. This is either going to start off the negotiations with Canada with a preconceived condition, whether it's court appointed or not, but it's going to have to stay on the table. And I don't see another option at this stage, to be very frank.
But you see, this is a litmus test, though, right? So the whole thing about the Citizen Initiative Act, let's just call a spade a spade. As everybody knows, the Alberta government could decide to have an independence referendum on its own anytime. It does not require this Citizen Initiative Act procedure to get there, right? So what the government of Alberta is trying to do is to avoid ownership of this. Avoid ownership. This is the play. You're trying to give the citizens the ability to launch a petition, which is great, good. But on the other hand, you don't want to have to do it yourself. This whole problem could be avoided tomorrow if the EPC said, there's enough interest in independence, we're going to hold a referendum. So don't worry about these proposals anymore. We get the message. We're going to do it. And then the only obstacle is this remaining section of the Referendum Act that needs to go. But this is the government trying to avoid being the one to move the ball down the field.
Correct. And look, and if they really wanted to open the door, as soon as the Elections Alberta kicked this to the court, they could have made the change to remove the question from the court altogether.
Of course.
Didn't.
Well,
Right?
they have a majority. They can amend the statutes as they wish. And just as they passed the last set of amendments, they can pass amendments to the statutes in fairly short order if they really wanted to. And if they don't, then they don't want to. That's the bottom line.
True. And after Thomas Lusakic's petition, which looks like it was successful, they're validating signatures now. Clearly, this question's on the table for Albertans, and maybe it's in the best interest of the UCP, one way or the other, to kind of put this question to bed. And they do seem to be not helping this question get to the table.
Right. And if the people of Alberta are not determined to have their government clear the way for an honest question without strings attached, if there's no appetite for that, then that says a lot about the chances of independence.
Yeah. I hear you on that one too. The polls inside the UCP, this would be a very difficult issue for the current leadership to ignore. And I think the AGM, I hope you can come down for it. I think the AGM is going to be quite the place to be, because I think just like the Alberta Next panels, where they were trying to propose certain things, and let's keep the topic on this. What you actually saw happen in the audience was, no, we don't even want to talk about those.
Yeah.
We want to talk about independence.
I think good luck trying to not speak about independence at the AGM.
Yeah, so it's either going to be a very contentious AGM, or maybe enough pressure to kind of get to what you're talking about here. Remove these sticks in the mud, get rid of the hurdles. They don't need to be there. And now that you've highlighted them and you brought it to the attention to many people, this might be exactly how this momentum builds. So this is why I like having these conversations. We don't have to agree on everything, but we certainly align on a lot.
Right.
Can you hang out for a little bit? Because there's a couple more questions I think are private side.
By all means. Yeah.
Any last comments to the rest of Alberta at this stage? Because I don't think they dislike you. They just, are shooting the messenger a little bit.
Well, sure. And of course, I'm on the sidelines. I'm just throwing things on the table.
And, you're pom-poms. You're also like, do it.
Right. Well, but yeah. But it's fine. Like, I'm not worried about people's reactions. This is going to be an uncomfortable process. This is going to be a messy thing. Seeking independence is going to be fraught with difficulty, with obstacles, with conflict, with disagreement, even amongst the people who are basically on the same side of the big question. And so that's fine. Not a problem. This is going to happen.
No, 100%. And look, as soon as you get two people together, you are going to have friction at some point. And divorces are always messy, no matter how you try to do it. Even with prenups in place, they're still messy. But hang out for a little bit. We're going to say goodbye to the public, and we'll come back to you in a moment. Okay, Bruce? Thanks for your time today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Okay, there you are, Alberta. This is not Bruce saying, no chance, it's done, don't even bother. He's highlighting the problems, and I hope APP, and by the way, when I posted that Bruce was coming on the show, the APP themselves liked the post. So they're very familiar with this conversation. They know what's going on, and they absolutely want to see a path forward. And they know it's a rocky one. And Jeff Rath is very clear. Like, he's getting ready for this right now as we speak. He's working on the arguments because they're back in court in a couple of weeks. They're back in court before the AGM. Which I think is an interesting timing, by the way. So all these arguments in court in mid-November, AGM end of November, and the decision is expected around Christmas time, maybe early 2026 from the court. Interesting timing, I got to say. But in either case, this doesn't mean it's over. But look, if you're sitting down with like your divorce lawyer and they say, look, you're going to lose the boat, you can't get mad. You can't get mad because that's just how it's going to be. And if we have to have some preconditions put in place, either by the court in order to stick with the law because they can't be changed, like that's difficult. But I don't think this Bruce's call is to try and remove the momentum.
No, it's just to educate us more, be more prepared so we can face any of these hurdles that will be coming up, whether we like it or not. There's
And
gonna be
Bruce can
hurdles.
kick this to the court.
Yeah.
Already it's in the court. This question that he's
Yeah.
talking about in his article is what's already before the court. If anything, he's educated hundreds or
Yeah.
thousands of Albertans on what it is they're talking about in the court. What is the hurdle APP can get over, has to get over? And then, it's a self-inflicted wound.
Yep.
Alberta did this to himself. This is not the federal government trying to nix any movement. It's the Alberta government, whether they intentionally did it, they were trying to appease Aboriginal rights, or what.
hmm
And coming out in public saying, "Hey, go ahead and let them vote," has no power.
Yeah.
As he said, ministers can't influence the court anyway. So we're going to see what it is. Buy your tickets to the AGM if you haven't already. We're going to be there
Yep.
as media, and absolutely, I'll be having a big bag of popcorn.
Yeah.
Because we'll see where this goes.
Yeah.
All right, public, thank you very much for your time. Make sure to share this out. It's about information. This is not division. This is actually the complete opposite of division. This is making sure that we know what we're getting into and how we can get through it. And it may not be as clean as we all want unless our current government makes it so.
Yes.
All right, everybody, have yourself a wonderful day.
Yeah, everyone have a fantastic day. See you tomorrow morning.
And keep up the chats.
Yeah.
It's awesome. Love you all, and God bless.